Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Great Tree Zen Women's Temple Online. It's 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And we'll start with opening the sutra. An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching. And this video is being recorded and it'll be up on our YouTube page, Great Tree Zen Women's Temple YouTube channel to revisit. So before I introduce our speaker this morning, I'm going to read a brief statement about the practice of dana. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana are to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. And Seido-san, our speaker this morning, has asked that any dana be directed to Great Tree. And so you can do that either you can send in a check or cash, or there's ways to do that online through our website via PayPal. Thank you, Seido-san. Thanks everyone for your practice this morning. So Seido Don Wilkerson, the title of this talk is Continuous Practice in a Changing World. Seido Don Wilkerson practices with the Charlotte Zen Meditation Society, where he has practiced for many years and now leads the practice. He was ordained a lay teacher by the abbess of Great Tree Zen Temple, the Rev Teijo Munnich. Thank you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I just want to briefly mention dana. You've, of course, just covered it very well, but I just want to remind everybody that the mountain seat ceremony is coming up very soon. It's going to be in September, and this is already mid-July, so it'll be here very soon. Teijo was just mentioning that just a couple of weeks ago, and it just struck me. Yeah, that's right. It's September, and here we are in the middle of July. And she made a couple of comments in the Friday morning study group that we had that I thought bear repeating. She mentioned that probably many of us are viewing this upcoming mountain seat ceremony as something that has mostly to do with Teijo-san. And she corrected us on that. And she said, really the spirit of the mountain seat ceremony is not Teijo-san as abbess of Great Tree Zen Temple, ascending the mountain, ascending the teachings of the Dharma to the top. It's about Sangha. And I would have been guilty of not seeing that myself. I'm so glad she said that. Really, this accomplishment of Great Tree and the mountain seat ceremony has a lot to do with the Sangha over the years. And I was just, in the last few days, I was thinking about it. I was trying to think about all the people who have come and gone from the Sangha over all these many, many years. People have come and supported the practice in such strong ways and done so much for Great Tree and the temple, and they may still be around or they may not still be around. It's really It's really extraordinary how that happens. You know, our teachings are that everything is always changing. That's one of the things I'll be talking about. But it's very humbling to realize that a temple like Great Tree has been built by so many different people and their efforts and different types of effort. You know, all the guests who have come and stayed, all the people who've practiced there and come and gone, they've all had different talents and different contributions to make, but it's all ended up being this temple that it is now. And we're about to acknowledge that in a really big and significant way. And as far as Donna goes, Teijo-san mentioned it's going to take quite a bit of money to have this ceremony. So I guess I'm just echoing what she said, that, you know, all of us should think and be aware of this ceremony and the ways that we can plug into it. I mean, some people will be able to volunteer their efforts and be there and do some of the things that are needed. Other people can contribute money or time, effort. There's a lot of ways to contribute, but we will be needing that in September. So I would like for everybody to remember that. I'll start my talk now. I was just thinking about over the last day or two. I've had several weeks of thinking about this, and I almost wish I could prepare all the material that I want to talk about first and then give it a title rather than the other way around. So I gave this Dharma talk the title of Continuous Practice in a Changing World, and I did that several weeks ago. And ever since then, I've been reading things, writing them down, and sort of trying to make my material fit the title and vice versa. But I'm going to start with two different quotations out of books, and they're going to be kind of bookends on this talk. And the first thing I'm going to quote is from a book that a number of us have been reading lately. It's called The Mountains and Water Sutra. It's Dogen's writings on Sansukyo and translated by Shuhaku Akamura. And I came across this particular quotation probably about a month or so ago. I joined the Friday morning discussion group when it was after it was already in progress. So I was not there from the very beginning, but one of the things that I read pretty early on in this when I got involved was this little quotation. And this quotation in and of itself is not famous, and it's not probably one of the most profound things Dogen ever said, but it just really caught my interest. And I ended up wanting to use it in as the framework, I guess, for a Dharma talk. And this is the quotation that's on page 114 in this book, The Mountains and Water Sutra. We take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha because these are the final places we return to. In Shobogenzo Gyoji, which is continuous practice, Dogen writes, continuous practice is not something worldly people love, but it should be the place all people truly return to. Our continuous, ceaseless practice, coming and going in the mountains, is our real refuge. End of quotation. And those of us who've been doing the Friday morning study group know that we've been talking about the mountains and the oceans as symbols of the Dharma and of the teachings and of our practice, and how we come and go from the mountains, how we come and go from the ocean in our efforts to practice this. Um, I think one of the things about this particular quotation that stands out to me, especially being a layperson, is where he says, continuous practice is not something worldly people love, but it should be the place all people truly return to. And I know down through all these many years of practicing with people in a Sangha, you know, we all, kind of shake our heads at this practice sometimes and say, how can we continue and what do we do to continue? It is in some ways a difficult practice, and even that gets into a discussion. Is it difficult? Is it not difficult? You can talk about this practice as a whole, or you can talk about just the practice of doing zazen. And either way, you can talk about it in a way that makes it sound very simple and straightforward, which it is. But you can also talk about it in such a way that it seems so demanding and difficult. How many times do we wake up and we have this intention, this feeling that we should go and sit on the cushion, and yet it's so inconvenient and it's so not what our ordinary ego mind wants to do on that particular day, and we struggle with it. And I think obviously everyone's practice is their own individual struggle. We all struggle in similar ways, but yet it's also very personal. And I often wonder, for myself and for others, what does work? What causes you to get up and go out there and sit on your zabuton with your cushion on it and sit when you could do so many other things? I think it comes down to, in a lot of ways, to an idea that I know I've heard a number of Dharma talks about, which is the word intention. Teachers will ask you sometimes what your intention is, and we ask ourselves that question. And as far as I can tell, you have to have an intention, and it's very much a part of this practice, whether we acknowledge it or not. So many times we say, I'm going to sit down and do zazen, and I'm going to sit down on my cushion and be still and quiet. And I'm going to be still and quiet to the point where my thoughts don't go away, but they just diminish. And I'm sort of more in the present moment, and I am less hindered by my ego mind than I normally am. And that's fine, but why are we doing that? That's where we come back to this word of intention. And how do you have an intention that doesn't violate the sense of practice in its most simple form? Because we say to ourselves, and we talk about it in Dharma talks, to sit. Sometimes we say sit with no intention, or sit with no gaining idea, which may be different than intention, really, actually. But we want to sit without letting that clinging come in that so often arises in our mind every day. We attach ourselves to a sense of accomplishment, a sense of gaining, a sense of making a difference. And it seems to be so difficult to separate ourselves from that. So this idea of intention has to be very pure. It has to be, how do I bring myself to the cushion every day and sit down and do so without this sense of accumulation, without this sense of, oh, I'm going to continue this practice and it's going to be an accumulation, and I'm going to be wiser, I'm going to be more enlightened, I'm going to be better in some sense. When we say that our intention is simply to sit down and to let go of all those clinging things, where we attach ourselves to a notion that we're accomplishing something, that something is accumulating. And actually, I'm just now sitting here thinking my intention was to, when I introduced this talk, I was going to have two different quotations kind of bookend the beginning and end of my talk. And I gave you the beginning quotation. I didn't give you the ending quotation, so I'll do that now. Because I was thinking about this subject that I'm talking on, the continuation of practice, and I thought, how can I express that? And so I went back to a place I go to often, which is the Genjo Koan. At the very end of the Genjo Koan, Dogen, who actually is responsible for that first quotation I gave you, at the end of the Genjo Koan, he says the following. This is the 13th little fascicle, if you want to call it, of the Genjo Koan. It's the final one. And he says, Zen Master Bosch of Mount Magoo was waving a fan. A monk approached him and asked, the nature of wind is ever present and permeates everywhere. Why are you waving a fan? The master said, you know only that the wind's nature is ever present. You don't know that it permeates everywhere. The monk said, how does wind permeate everywhere? The master just continued waving the fan. The monk bowed deeply. And it was my intention to bookend this whole talk with those two quotations, starting out with how lay people find this practice to be so difficult in a sense, and how at the end quotation, Dogen simply says, you just sit. You just continue waving the fan. There are literally generations and generations and generations of Dharma teaching that have evolved over the years, since the Buddha's time, even since Dogen's time, which keep expounding on those simple ideas. How do we get started in this practice, and how do we continue it? We can turn to the most poetic and most philosophical ideas, like those quotations, or we can just turn to even the more practical. I really, really appreciate Teijo-san's quotation. She actually just mentioned it about a week or so ago, when she said, the most difficult part of Zen practice is just getting yourself to the cushion. Just a simple statement, but she's so right. Once you sit down on that cushion, it's like it transforms you. You feel so different, but it's getting there. it's it's after you wake up after a long night's sleep and you're just lying there or sitting there thinking, I got a million things to do today, all of which are important. You know, what is going to cause me to go sit zazen instead of doing those things? And sometimes it's just having that zabuton and having that zafu parked in the same place every day and just going to it. If you can, don't even think about it. Just do it. Just wave the fan. So is it that simple or not? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Because every day it keeps coming back up. I think that's what we mean when we talk about the continuousness of practice, the continuity of it. You don't sit down and practice just once and say, okay, well, I've done Zen and that's it. I don't ever have to go back and do this again. I was thinking too, in this Friday morning study group that we're doing, talking about the mountains and the oceans as symbols of the vastness of the Dharma. And just like I was referring to a minute ago, the teachings that have been passed down for generations, still emphasizing that same kernel of truth, you know, the essential teaching really hasn't changed, even though so many different masters have picked it up and talked about it in so many different ways. The kernel of truth still comes down to that simple zazen practice. But when we see the vastness of that mountain ahead of us, and we realize how steep it is, and we've all taken hikes before, and we've all walked on mountains, and we know what an ordeal it is, we're so intimidated by it. Same thing with the ocean. I was thinking about this last week when we were talking about it. You know, some of the people in our study group were saying, well, I identify more with the mountains and I identify more with the water. Either way, you know, when I stand on the beach and stare at that ocean, it's just incredible. It's just like the words from the Genjo Koan when, you know, Dogen's talking about being in the boat surrounded by water and seeing the horizon in every direction, 360 all around you. You're literally alone. You're in a boat in the water in the middle of the ocean. And this water goes on seemingly forever. You can't see land in any direction. Same thing of being on the side of a mountain. You can't see the top of the mountain because you're not there. And it may just seem mythical, like I don't even know if there is a top to this mountain. It's so intimidating. But I was also thinking about how wherever we are in this practice, and we're all at a different place, the point at which you are at also supports you. I mean, it really does. If you're on the mountain, you can pause. No matter how steep it is and no matter how tired you are from climbing, you can stop and you can sit down. And there's a sense in which when you're sitting right there in that moment, you are on the mountain and you're not on the mountain. You don't have to be overwhelmed by the place you're at because you're right there. Same thing with the ocean. You can be in the middle of that ocean with no land in sight anywhere. And the water just like that mountain seems so intimidating, but yet it's supporting you. You're floating on top of the water. You're not going anywhere. You haven't drowned. You're just sitting there, maybe in a boat, however, you're sitting there on the water. And in that moment, in that particular space and time, you are, so to speak, safe. You are just practicing. You're there. The ocean exists, and it still is as vast as it is. But in that moment, when you're just clear-headed about where you're at, you're not intimidated by it. The ocean may be vast, but it's just vast, that's all. The mountain may be tall. It may be hard to climb, but in that moment, you're just there. And I think that the continuousness of it is just that you continue to float. You continue to move on that water. Or if you're on the mountain, you just continue one step at a time. You don't have to be so aware of the steps you've taken that are behind you or anticipate the steps that are ahead of you. You can just be right there. It's really like that's the only way you can do this. I don't even think you have a choice, really. The choice is just one of those delusions in your mind. So that's our practice, just continuing to wave the fan. You may be able to relate to it when you're standing there or sitting there waving your fan. You may not be able to relate to it, but either way, it's really the only practice there is. And it's enough. It's sufficient. I have no idea how much time has passed here. I don't know if my Dharma talk's long enough or too long. I don't know. I always seem to have this problem. I do know I want to leave some time for people to comment. If you feel so inclined, if you want to ask a question or if you just want to make a comment, if you want to add to what I've said, if you want to correct something I've said, please feel free to do so. So I'll just allow everybody to participate now.
Thank you so much, Seido-san. I was wondering if I could ask you a question.
Okay.
I think I heard from Teijo Roshi how long and strong your practice has been. And for so many years, you've continued Sunday practice. And I was wondering if you could talk maybe just from the heart about what has kept you coming back for years, not just one day, but there's a longer, slower current of time. And I would love anything that you could share for us, please.
Thank you. I think the first word that comes to mind when you ask that is Sangha. All of us who practice know that there's the Tripadaka, or the three baskets of Zen, or the three baskets of Zen, Buddhist practice. Zen practice and Buddhist practice. But The whole idea of being Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And they're not three different things, actually. We just give them three different names and talk about them differently, but they're really merged together. I can tell you without a question, if I'd been by myself all this time, I wouldn't be here right now. One of the things that Teijo-san impressed on me, and I think others way, way back, because when she first started teaching to us, I think it's fair to say, I know in my case it's true, my only experience of Zen was through books. And books are very, very flat or very one-dimensional, you might say. Books are great because they transmit the teaching, or they help to transmit the teaching, but they do it in such a manner that there can be a lot of misunderstanding if you're not careful. And that's why not people like me, but people who are really, really wise in this tradition say that there are three things you need to rely on, and that's Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the idea of Buddha is, sort of best represented in your practice as being your teacher. Dharma being these vast teachings that there just seem to be so many of. You can't read and study all the Dharma. There's been so much written and talked about over the years. You can't cover it all. I think we've talked about that before. And then Sangha, which is it's at the same time the glue that holds all this together, and it's also the lubrication that allows all three to work together. Sangha is that spirit of doing something in the universe that's not all about you. Excuse me. Sangha just continually pulls us out of ourself. It's part of that process of letting go of the self, is when you realize you have this tremendous responsibility to the Sangha, and the Sangha has a responsibility to you. It pulls you out of being yourself. It pulls you out of that thing I was talking about a little earlier, where, no, I'm not practicing for myself. I have to give up that idea of achieving something, accomplishing something, but yet I still have to have that intention. Well, the intention, comes a lot from your Sangha and from your teacher. They will, whether you want them to or not, they will continually remind you of where you're stuck in yourself and where you're free. And they'll help you to be free when you are stuck. So anyway, that's my short and long answer to your question. I have many, many quotes laying around here that my dear friend Milton provided me with. You were just speaking of somebody who's practiced forever and ever and ever. Well, that would be Milton. And one of the things he is so good at is, just like I was just talking about Sangha, supporting other people. And he sent me a lot of quotations here, most of which I'm not going to go over because there's just too many of them. But every one of them are consistent with what we've just talked about. It's the same kernel of truth, the same idea. And I just happened to look down at this one that I had marked. And this is a quotation that Milton sent me from Dainin Katagiri Roshi. Quote, "The place you can depend on is not the place you are seeking, it's the place you already are." And that comes from The Light That Shines Through Infinity, page 207, if you're interested in looking that up. And that harkens back to this theme that we're always on, really, but we've been on the last few weeks, which is that, you know, this as it isness, you know, to be where you are, to be in the circumstance you're in, is the sense of being as it isness. You really can't be anywhere else anyway. You can be when you're deluding yourself, but not when you're clear. You can only be where you really and truly are.
Seido-san, thank you for your talk and your practice. I'm very inspired by your ability, to continue with it. These many years is very inspiring. And I'd like to ask a question about just practicing now. And I guess my question is I guess just the title of your talk, Continuous Practice in an Ever-Changing World, kind of for me sets up this, in my own constructs in my own head, this idea of like change and then consistency, you know, practice and change. Not that the two are separate, but I guess my question is around like how, you know, how do we maintain the practice and the teachings and the tradition while also meeting kind of the moment, meeting the times, you know, and you know, how do we know when to go, when to stay, when to switch? You know, I'm thinking about technology too, and the move onto Zoom that happened here at Great Tree a few years ago. How do you have any, could you share any about like how that's looked like for you, and how do you kind of know how do you allow your practice to meet the times? I guess that question makes sense.
That's a great question, and it's actually in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, I've been trying to prepare for this talk and reading some things and trying to freshen some things up in my memory. The whole idea of Zoom did occur to me, but as you can see, I didn't mention it in my talk at all. And, you know, I suppose the short answer is, well, you've got to be in the moment, you know. Back when the pandemic happened, it caught everybody by surprise, of course. I mean, who anticipated that? And so there was, I don't know about everybody else's Sangha and everybody else's group, but there's this sense of scrambling around like, oh, what are we going to do? You know, I know our group here in Charlotte, we met at a place called Harmony House, you know, a physical location, a place we were renting. This very small little venue, but just felt like home. It really did, because we had sat there, I don't even know how many times, since like 1990, all the way up to the pandemic. So we had been there a long time, and it felt like home. Mm. When I would walk up those stairways, and everybody who's ever been there knows it's this real narrow, twisting stairway that makes a 90-degree turn before you get to the top floor, and it's so unique of a place. It's really an attic that somebody converted into a meeting space. Anyway, it still to this day feels like home. I miss it. Mm. But when the pandemic broke out, in the very early days, we were all afraid to be together physically, because we were afraid we'd just be exchanging this virus back and forth, and it would be harmful and dangerous and whatever. So here again, Great Tree, steps in, and it was Teijo-san who got onto Zoom, and then very shortly into that, let us know about it and offered to let us use the Great Tree Zen Temple's Zoom account to actually continue our practice. So there's your answer right there. That's how Sangha continues to support you. And it's just been a long journey ever since then. Obviously there came a point when the pandemic had evolved to the point where people started feeling safe about being together again. So we got on the phone and called the people at Harmony House. And unfortunately, over the year or two that had passed, things had evolved to the point where they were no longer offering the space to us for whatever reason. They had other things they were doing with it, and things had just changed. That's, the whole point of our existence. We have to be in the moment, and we have to adjust. We have to make these adjustments, and sometimes they're not comfortable and not what we want. Our minds cling to certain things, and we wish we could do this and wish we could do that. But the reality is we no longer have that space. And so here we are continuing to meet on Zoom. And it's very convenient because, as you guys can see, many of us can meet, even though we're in very far-flung locations. I know Milton is down in Florida. I don't know where some of the rest of you are at. Obviously, Ginjo's up at Great Tree. I'm in Charlotte. But Zoom makes this possible, which is really interesting. It's an adaptation that in Zen practice, we might not have made if it hadn't been for the pandemic, because we continue our practice in the tradition as it's been done for thousands of years. And to suddenly introduce Zoom just seems so out of sync with our practice. But I don't know whether it is or not. Maybe it's not. So here we are. And, none of us can know just how many more adjustments we're going to make, because things are going to continue to change. They always do. And, as practitioners, we have to stay in the moment. And that means stay in the moment of change, to be right there at the cusp of change, recognize it for what it is. And like I said, you can be in the middle of a big, very intimidating ocean and still be very comfortable. You can be in that place and be completely at ease and at one with yourself right in that place. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Don and I got together in 1990 to form Put Down Roots, called Charlotte Zen Meditation Society. I just have two quotes to add. The reason for the quotes is I actually started an interest in Zen reading D.T. Suzuki's book that came out when he was at Columbia University in the late 50s. And when I started Zen in 68, there were only 3 Zen books. No Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. One called The Way of Zazen by Rendo Fujiyama, which was really good. And then a translation of Zuioji. And that was it. I mean, there was 3 Pillars of Zen. That was the big one by Philip Kapleau. So anyway, I've always I majored in philosophy, so quotes have meant a lot to me. I'm still doing it. So before I chatter on too long, I just want to throw out two quotes and see how they bounce around. Last night I had quotes all over my table because I do it every day. And I had one by J. Krishnamurti. I don't know if y'all know of Krishnamurti. Eckhart Tolle loves Krishnamurti, and so do I. And then I had one by Ed Brown. Ed Brown is a Dharma heir of Mel Wetzman from San Francisco Zen Center. And he studied with Shunryu Suzuki as well for years until Suzuki died. So anyway, I saw a phrase from Krishnamurti over here, and then I saw this thing from Ed Brown, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to put these things together." So here it is. The first half of this sentence is from Krishnamurti. The second half is from Ed Brown's book called "The Most Important Point." So here we go. Here's Krishnamurti, and I use this as to answer the question, what is Zen practice? What is sitting? And so Krishnamurti said, the austerity of a deep simplicity. The austerity of a deep simplicity. And then this phrase is from Ed Brown, which is a good place to have our problems. So I think that's a wonderful sentence. Zen sitting, and I'm adding Zen sitting. Krishnamurti didn't talk about, he mentioned Zen vaguely, but he was very, he didn't want any kind of generalized theology or labeling. He was absolutely adamant about that. But anyway, one more time. So Zen sitting or Zen practice is an austerity of deep simplicity, which is a good place to have our problems. All right, so the second thing that I like, and this is all over the place in Zen teachings and in Buddhist teachings, and I don't think it can ever be made clear enough. If you look on page 40 in Realizing Genjo Koan by Okamura, he has at the very bottom of page 40, see, this is me, where I know where these quotes are, I know where they came from. He says, thinking is not doing. And if that point's not made clear, I would say people are going to miss the boat with their sitting. And because I sat with that wrong view, wrong intention for 30 years and ended up one summer having to stay on Librium, Valium to keep from going crazy because my intention was wrong. So thinking and doing are two different things. All right, so here's the two quotes I'm going to throw out here, and then I'll shut up, hopefully. Let me find them here. All right, this is from Krishnamurti. The intention with which you approach the problem is more important than knowing what to do about it. So we want to know what to do, and that's thinking on the thinking side. And the other part of this is it's more important to know what's actually going on now. Sitting lets us go into what's happening now. All right, so I'll shut up.
Thank you, Milton.
I might offer a thought about the intention that we've been talking about and the significance of intention, certainly. Something that has served me well over the years has been a single intention each time. Wholeheartedness in everything that holds. I have just always gone back to that after time, after discovery, of course. I just wanted to share that thought and the appreciation for the Dharma talk and the quotes and questions, and also the emphasis on intention. Why? Why? Grateful for that.
Thank you for your comment.
One more quick Krishnamurti. Although my wife sent me a note and said, shut up. Don was always good about saying, just back up a little bit. We were a good pair, I'm telling you. Okay. So the practice is not about what to do in Zazen, it's what are you doing now? We would invite people on weekends that were available to come to Charlotte Zen Meditation Society, and we brought a guy named John who studied insight meditation teachings. I think he studied in Burma. Anyway, probably about 91 or 92, Don, and he came and gave a talk. And he stayed over at my house, and we were having breakfast the next morning. And I went on and on about what to do in Zazen, because that's all I know. I kept trying to do this thing I was still in the figuring it out expectation mode. So here's this John in the insight meditation. He essentially said to me at some point, he said, well, what are you doing now? And I didn't get it. I didn't get it till 10 years later.
Well, a thought that just occurred to me that came up because of everybody's comments that have just been made in the last few minutes is that we have to remember that our Zazen and our state of mind continues after we get off the cushion and get up and go into the world, so to speak. Our Zazen is no good if it's just while we happen to be sitting cross-legged on a zafu. That's only where we sit down and have an intention, as somebody said a minute ago. That's where we set our intention by being very quiet and still and getting into the moment. But our lives really are about what happens after we get up off that zafu and we turn around and bow to our cushion and turn around and bow to the room, and then we leave the room and go out and do whatever it is we do. That's where real Zen practice actually is. You know, being awake, being aware, and being in the moment. So does anyone else have any other comments they'd like to make or questions they'd like to ask? Well, I don't know exactly when we're going to close, but I do want to say before we close, I appreciate this opportunity to give a Dharma talk, and I'm going to be honest and say that it's also it shouldn't be, but I guess it troubles me some because there's this sense of responsibility. I've been the recipient of a lot of Dharma talks over the years, many of which were from Teijo-san. And I know how deeply she practices, and I know she practiced with a lot of people who were very deep into practice. And so Dharma talks are just something that are just, I don't know, they give me this almost overwhelming sense of responsibility that, wow, this amazing Dharma treasure has been passed on for generations, not in paper, but from teacher to student, because they don't trust any other way. And, to realize that you're now a part of that is in its own way a bit unsettling. It's like, wow, me? And all I'm going to say is it just comes back to where we started, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha tradition. You're never alone. This practice doesn't exist without all three of those working together. And anyway, I'll stop jabbering now. I just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting me, and thank you for supporting each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seido-san. Just a few quick announcements. Tomorrow we'll have a Sunday service, volunteer work day here at Great Tree. And so we'll start at 9:15 with some zazen if you're in the area. And then just work for a couple hours, have some lunch, and then continue into the afternoon. This is just getting us prepared for the mountain seat ceremony, to prepare the temple and grounds. And you're welcome. Everyone's invited to that. Spread the word. You're welcome to stay for some of it or none of it. You're welcome to just come sit at 9:15. And that, I guess that's more for the local folks. Regular programming continues. Thursday evening zazen. You can use the same Zoom link here. That starts at 6. We sit for 2 periods. Saturday Dharma talks and zazen will continue. Family meditation next Sunday, the last Sunday of the month. That starts at 10:30, and all are welcome. And there's an intro to Zen class this Sunday at 10:30, both in person at Great Tree and on Zoom. So if you have anyone who has been bugging you about getting into zazen and you think they could benefit from just kind of a brief introduction, that'll be this Sunday at 10:30. Is today Sunday? No, tomorrow. It'll be tomorrow. This Sunday is tomorrow. And that's about it. Once again, thank you, Seido-san. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you for your continuous practice. And we'll give back the merit to call and response, and then we'll close out. May the merit of this practice,
may the merit of this practice
benefit all beings,
benefit all beings,
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.